the Nick Seeler extension, 4 years, $2.7 million average annual value, a no trade clause years 1 and 2, no protections in years 3 and 4. I can live with 2.7, especially with the cap going up. Someone did the math. It's like 3.8% of the cap for next year or something. Like, I can live with that for a guy who they believe is integral both on the ice and off for this team. What did you guys think of this deal?
I mean, like, is it optimal? No. Like, I wish they didn't sign him for 4 entire years. I think that's a little bit long for a guy his age who 2 years ago was not a hockey player. Do I care? Not really, because I don't think that at 2.7 this negatively impacts the Flyers in any way. I don't think it hampers the rebuild in any way. I don't really think that it's going to block any kids at this point, and they really like him. So, like, if this is going to be the pet that they give John Tortorella to keep him happy, like, all right, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I do worry a little bit that it could block some kids. That said, I'm curious to see how the rest of the offseason plays out. Like, if they move Rasmus Ristolainen, and suddenly I don't have as much of a concern about Nick Seeler blocking a kid. I do worry a bit as well. I've articulated on the show that if Seeler regresses, as players sometimes do in their 30s, especially one who plays the way Nick Seeler plays, I worry that, John Tortorella would be so in love with Nick Seeler because he's the culture guy who blocks shots that he won't pull him out of the lineup. Even if somebody like Emile Andre is banging down the door and it's like, well, we got to keep Nick Seeler in for reasons. I do worry about that. However, I acknowledge where the Flyers are coming from, which is their belief. Like, the people who look at this signing and say, well, this just shows they're not rebuilding. In their minds, and you're free to disagree with this thought process, in their minds, this extension is furthering the rebuild. Not because Nick Seeler is necessarily going to be a big piece on the next great Flyers team, or even necessarily be on the next great Flyers team. The no trade clause is only for 2 years. They could trade him in year 3, or they could send him down to the minors if he stinks. There's a lot of different ways to get out of that deal. What it does do, however, in their minds, is they think Nick Seeler's presence really does foster the culture they want to build. And they think the culture that they want to build also helps in player development. So their viewpoint is, by re-signing Nick Seeler, we are creating a culture that will make it more likely that our young defensemen and young players will reach their ceilings. Now, again, you can disagree with that. But they are not re-signing Nick Seeler because it's like, well, we can't afford to lose Nick Seeler. We got to win games. This is just as much about what they think, the impact they think he has on the young players and on the culture as a whole, which they believe, therefore, like, even if it's not Nick Seeler necessarily like putting his arm around Cam York and being like, kid, this is how you got to do this play. They believe, and I've talked about it on the show, that like just Nick Seeler blocking every shot in the world and then limping back to the bench and everybody going crazy, losing their mind over time is going to influence their young defenseman to be like, I should sacrifice for the good of the team too. Like, that is the thought process of having Nick Seeler here. And they believe that his presence, his continued presence on the team, will create the kind of environment that allows the young players to hit their ceilings. They might be wrong, but it's not like this is a signing that was done because they need to squeeze one more win out of a team. This is a signing that has legitimate implications on the way they want to rebuild.
I put this on Twitter today, and I was looking forward to getting to run this theory by you guys. I think this signing kind of is an acknowledgement of furthering the rebuild, and potentially an acknowledgement that even though we're quote-unquote overachieving this year, we might not be ahead of schedule. Things might take a while, and things might be up and down over the next couple of years. They're going to make the playoffs this year. They might miss them next year. Maybe they're back in. Maybe they're on the bubble. Maybe they have one bottom-out year just because, like, that happens sometimes. Especially if they're thinking about potentially moving Scott Lawton by Friday or this summer, whatever it might be. you want these culture guys around to have a steady presence and a steady measuring stick of like, this is what is expected of you. This guy right here. This is not a hypothetical. It's this fucking guy. Work as hard as him. Compete as hard as him. I think like as much as, I would have traded him. 100% I would have traded him. And this 4 years is a risk. The guy's hurt right now. He's on IR. Like this could be a disaster. Absolutely. Now, it's not an Andrew McDonald level disaster because it's half the cap hit for 1 less year on a guy who's better, and the cap's like $20 million more than it was when Andrew McDonald signed. So, like, it's not going to be a disaster.
Wasn't it? It was 6 years, $30 million.
6 years, 30 million.
5, right? I never remember what the years, and so it's
6 years, 30 million. More years.
Yeah. So, I think it's going to probably be okay, but I do think it's a signal like shit's going to take a while, and we need guys like this around to hold things together while it's taking a while.
Yeah, I mean, he'll have 1 year left on his contract, presumably when it is Matvey time. So,
hey, Vince wants to give us little bonuses. I'm fine with it.
What a legend.
That's we talked about on the show, and this is Vince's super chat. We talked about, I think yesterday, like, okay, if they were to re-sign Sean Walker, which obviously they didn't, he is now an Av. I like to call them the Avalanche. My wife likes that. If they were to re-sign him, though, would that kind of just be like, okay, now they have to trade Risto, and that is an obvious sign? Do you think this has anything to do with the potential moving of Rasmus Ristolainen this summer?
I think they probably would have tried it. Yeah. I think they probably would be trying that anyway.
Yeah. I get the sense that Risto is available. I also get the sense they know that it's not going to be easy, that NHL teams like Risto, more NHL teams like Risto now. There were always a few teams that liked Risto, but they were the ones that basically thought advanced stats were bullshit, and that all of us nerds were totally wrong about Ristolainen's value. The teams that think that math is real were like, I won't touch that guy with a fucking 10-foot pole. Now there are more teams that are like, well, this version of Risto is actually pretty good. He's overpaid, but he's a pretty good player. Like, we'll think about it. So I think there are now more teams that would be potentially interested in Ristolainen. However, if the Flyers are going to trade Ristolainen, they're probably going to have to retain money, which means that it's not an easy trade to make. Doesn't mean it's impossible. It just makes it a little bit tougher. Danny showed he can be creative, so maybe it gets done. I don't think re-signing Seeler makes it so Ristolainen has to be moved. I, however, think it makes it easier for them to do it, because now they have a culture guy who fights and hits and does stuff. And yeah, he's not as big of a hitter as Ristolainen, but he certainly fights a hell of a lot more than Risto. He's much more active in scrums than Risto. So it gives you maybe more of a willingness to lose that physicality, because now you got Seeler for 4 years. You don't need, I've always said I don't understand why they need both. Well, now they've got both unless they decide to trade Risto. So maybe now you trade Risto. But I don't think they have to trade Risto because they re-signed Seeler.
No, but you cannot at this point overstate the importance of Risto being back for the playoffs. Like, we need everyone to see.
I need to see playoff Risto.
And we need him to be the monster that people think he's going to be in the playoffs. Like, I need it to happen.
Kelly, I was literally going to say, we just, like, the most, maybe more importantly than getting anyone any playoff experience, showcasing playoffers. If he can just put one top 6 forward through the fucking boards in the playoffs, knock a dude out for like 2 games, then guess what? Risto for a first, baby.
Get Toronto on the phone immediately.
Dude, as soon as they get the shit kicked out of them by Florida, Lawton and Risto to the Leafs for whatever they have left.
I don't care what it is, actually. Just take him.
We all silly like the mayor.